thank you everyone for joining. Well, hopefully everyone can see my screen, and just a quick run through the agenda. So just going myself and Ian are just going to give you some key updates on some dates and changes to certifications. Then we've got our sponsors. Object First, Marv's going to give us a session just around Zero Trust. And then we've got quite an interesting session where Leah is going to go through building your own dashboard with VCS operations, which I think is quite relevant at the moment, given how prevalent VCS is for the UK landscape. And then closing out, we've got Craig from Veeam giving us a bit of backstory into not about the how, but the why you go around choosing data protection. And if you're all still with us at the end, we have a quick quiz as well. So hopefully everybody will be here for that and playing to win.
Yeah, just on the quiz. So this is the hook to make you stay until the end. So all of the questions are related to today's content. So speakers have kindly offered up some questions relating to their presentations. So please pay attention. And some big prizes on the line at the end. First prize, £100, followed by £50 for second place, and then £25. I think it's Amazon vouchers we're going with. So yeah, there's a few people on here. Odds are pretty good, but stick around. It's a Kahoot quiz. I'm sure you will enjoy it.
Right, and kicking in. So certification updates. VMCA exam, as probably everyone's aware, retired last year, and the VMCE exam retired 2 days ago. I mean, we're now past the date that people can take that exam and get awarded that. But at the time of writing this, and I'll caveat that, at the time of writing, VMCE was still a valid exam. So what's happening is we're getting the VMCE Plus to replace the VMCE. What that entails is your traditional backup and replication, configure and manage and recover training. So that is on demand or instructor led. But they're going for a more balanced approach over Veeam Data Platform as opposed to just targeting VBR itself. So the other two complementary courses to get VMCE Plus is the Veeam 1 and the VRO course. Now these are on demand only. You can access these through Veeam University online. Really simple and easy to do. If you just Google Veeam University, if you're just like an end user organization, if you're a partner, have a look on the Pro Partner portal, and you can get some quite good discounts as a partner there. And then the new exam is VMCSE, which is the Certified Security Expert. You've got to do the VMCE Plus and the Enterprise Data Security course, which again is on demand only, and both of those will be exams at the end of it to get the certifications. I don't know, has anybody got any questions just around the certifications at the moment?
Or does that get you, Mark? Does that teach you anything cool? Is that really just a tick in the box for partners to meet certain partner requirements? Like what's that about?
It's double-edged. I think there's very much the partner piece. So these new requirements, certainly VMCE Plus, will be key for partners now, and that's replacing the element around VMCE and VMCA for those in the platinum partner space. And there's going to be slight changes as well. The technical sales professional course will be replaced by the technical specialist, which again is in the Pro Partner portal. But yeah, other than that, these courses combined are going to give you a really good overview of the platform. Again, not just the basic backup and replication capabilities, but how we could do monitoring with Veeam 1, and VRO is going to play a really key piece in this as well. How you can orchestrate workloads and automate your recovery testing, get documentation produced. I'll be doing a write-up on the VRO course probably in the next week or two. So just keep an eye out on the community hub or my blog, which I'll try and promote later on. But if anyone's got no questions, we'll move on to some key dates that are coming up. So for those of you that are interested, Veeam in London, registrations may be open now, and that's taking place on June the 3rd in London. And there's just details on how to register there. But more importantly, September, we're going to have an in-person event in Manchester. So we're moving away from London, and hopefully people will be, we'll see quite a few there in Manchester in person. Keep an eye out on our community page just for updates on that. As always, if you'd like to guest present, please speak to myself or Ian, reach out on the community hub or message us on LinkedIn, wherever you know us from. We're happy to help and advise and guide people on that. It's not scary. People may think speaking in public is, but we've got quite an exciting event lined up in September. Again, Object First, thanks to them being our sponsors for that as well. Anybody got any questions?
Well, I can point out something there, Mark. There's a free lunch as well. So if that doesn't get you through the door, come on. Then there's the Veeam content, and then we'll wrap up at the end of the day. So half day in Manchester. I think it'll be a great day out. That one. Yeah,
swag and prizes as well.
Yeah. And then Veeam just for anyone who doesn't know, actually, Veeam's changed tact this year in their what they call their flagship event, which was Veeam typically held in the US. That no longer exists. There's now 3 one-day events around the world, London being one of them, New York and Sydney are the other 2. So if you fancy traveling a bit further, you have options there as well. But sorry, in the interest of time, let's move on. Sorry, Mark.
Sorry. And then just a couple of useful links. I'm very aware that we do these events and not everybody knows where to find us. So community.veeam.com is the community hub. Great place to interact with like-minded users. Veeam forums as well is another often overlooked place. That's quite a good place if you've got technical questions and need help. That's browsed by members of Veeam's product management and product strategy teams. So it's quite a good place to, if you've got any improvements that you'd like to suggest, put them there. And then our own user group page is on the community hub. And I'm going to do a little shout out for Adrian Lowe here. So Adrian's got a section just dedicated to service providers, where he puts a lot of very good information out for those of you in the service provider space. And that, I think, is us, and pretty much on time. And what we'll do, we'll switch over to Marv and let her do her session.
Thanks, Mark. Just gonna share my screen now. You can see?
Yep.
Okay. Perfect, thank you. Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Marv Anson, and I cover pre-sales here at Object First across our UK region. And today I just want to have a conversation about zero trust model and how we at Object First think that needs to kind of evolve and transform, and where we think it can do that. If you have any questions as I go along, please could you put them in the chat or the Q&A section, and after my session, I'll just go through and answer the questions there. All right, so I'm going to start with setting the scene a bit. So we've done some research as an organization, and we've also pulled some of the research from the ESG group and just some trends we've seen across the industry, including some of the Veeam ransomware trends. All of the kind of stats and figures I'll be talking about throughout the rest of the slides are primarily from this this group of research. So to start off right off the bat, we're seeing now that about 66% of organizations that have taken part of the survey have suffered some sort of ransomware attack. And this figure breaks down into the next few slides, showing who's able to recover, how often are they being hit, and kind of other stats like that. So starting off from here, we're seeing that 34% of these organizations, so out of the 66%, have experienced ransomware attacks within the past 2 years. And if you look at the kind of scale of how many times they've been hit, many organizations think that once they've been hit once and they can recover from it, that is it. The attackers will assume that they are now impenetrable and will not try again. Reality shows that that is not the case. We're seeing 8% of organizations have been hit 5 times or more. And this is because the reality of things is being able to recover, one, takes a lot of time, and two, it takes a really long time to get to a point where you're now confident that if you get hit again, you won't be have the same experience. And I've spoken to many customers who, unfortunately, do have the same experience when they're hit the second time or the third time around, and they just become easy targets for ransomware attackers. Now, this number is one that has grown exponentially over the past few years. So 96% is what we're seeing in terms of attacks that have involved backups directly. And so now we know that backups are no longer secondary targets or kind of afterthoughts, but they are the primary target. So ransomware attackers are looking at environments and thinking, we need to go for the backups first so that there's nothing to recover from, and then hit the rest of the environment. Across the research and the surveys that we've kind of gone through, what we're seeing here is that less than 50% of organizations are able to recover within a business week. And this means loss of money, loss of time, loss of reputation. But we're also seeing that the days that it's taken to recover increases exponentially depending on the setup that they had at the time. And the next slide will show you actually the number of organizations who, before they were hit by ransomware, had about maybe 69% of them were saying they were ready to be hit by ransomware and they were sure that they could recover. And after the first attack, that drops down to about 49%. So we're seeing here that the number of people, organizations who are able to recover in less than a day is maybe 9 to 10% of them. The rest of them, it continues to increase 1 to 5 days, and the maximum being 24 days and above. There's really no end to how long it can take to recover from. So we've heard a lot in the news, especially last year. We had the Range Rover, we had Marks and Spencer's, and we were seeing updates from the organization saying it's going to take this number of weeks to get back online. It's going to take this number of weeks to recover what we've lost. With Marks and Spencer, I believe it was about £300 million kind of loss. And for larger organizations, they might be able to weather that, but for small organizations, we have seen in real time that it's just absolutely critical that they're able to recover quickly. Otherwise, they're sometimes not able to recover at all. So about 25% or less have recovered their data. And so when we're talking about recovery and coming back to working normally, we're considering access to data and then recovering that data in a way where they're able to run their businesses. So about less than 10% are able to recover 5% of their 5% of them are able to recover less than 10% of their data. And you see how that goes round to the end where it's saying about 90 to 100% of the data is being able to be recovered only by 27% of the people, of the organizations within this survey. And that we're seeing is the smaller side of it. So across the entire kind of pie that we're looking at here, only 27% of them can say that, yes, we were hit by ransomware. Yes, it took our systems down, but we were able to recover between 91 to 100% of the data. Everyone else is struggling in terms of how much data they're losing and how much time it's taking for them to come back up. We also have to look at the human cost of this because there is an IT organization at the forefront, and they're really the kind of frontline workers when it comes to ransomware attackers and who's going to be blamed for it. So this survey really focused in on how they're feeling about the systems that they have, who they think will be responsible or held responsible in the case of a ransomware attack. And we're seeing that 84% of them are unreasonably and uncomfortably stressed over IT security risks. And that's because there is a huge percentage there of them thinking that they will be blamed for this because they're, again, at the forefront of it. and about 59% of them are actively looking for new jobs. But what I want to focus on here is the 74% of them that are saying the solutions can be there, but they are so complex, they require some level of security expertise that reduce their confidence when working with the solutions to be able to say, yes, we are in a position where we are ransomware proof. So these are the figures I was talking about earlier, when theory meets reality, where before an attack, organizations are very confident that they have everything that they need to kind of weather the storm and be secure in the case of an attack. And that confidence drops dramatically and continues to drop once they've been hit by ransomware, and the time between that moment and how long it takes for them to recover. So now just pausing here to kind of reflect on some of the things that we've looked at. The main point is that organizations can be prepared, but there are certain kind of models and principles that need to be in place for them to be in a position where they really can be ransomware proof, because we know now that backups are high risk, that 96% is a reality. Ransomware attackers are prioritizing backups, and therefore organizations have to prioritize protecting those backups. So now we're looking at data resilience and the concept of assuming breach under the zero trust model, and how that works, and where we think, as an organization, this needs to evolve. So the original zero trust principles have been in the industry for a while, and you'd be familiar with it anyways. Assuming breach, segmenting access, verifying explicitly, having multi-factor authentication. These are things that we're all kind of familiar with, and these came as a result of understanding that there was a need to silo access within an organization. Not everyone within the company needed access to every single thing. And so using that least privilege access was really important. And this helped a lot in just trying to, again, reduce that attack surface area. But where we are now is considering what this looks like with backup as its focus, and that brought about the zero trust data resilience principles. Now, this looks like segmentation of backup software and storage. So that separation being not just logical, but physical, multiple resilience zones. So, as an organization, Veeam talks about this fairly often, and so you'll be familiar with it, and immutable backup storage. One really cool thing about immutable backup storage, actually, that we've seen as an organization that sells immutable backup storage, is that some of our clients, we have one in particular, that have been able to reduce their cyber insurance premiums as a result of proving that the solution they're using within the environment is not some sort of DIY solution. It's not something they've put together or retrofit to work. It is something that has been engineered purposefully to be an immutable backup storage, and that has reduced the premium per year significantly enough that it covered the cost of the solution. Now, the zero trust data resilience principle, when we kind of put that in an architecture format, it looks like this, where you have your production environment, you have your backup software, and you have this segmentation of backup software and backup storage, and making sure that you're looking at those multiple resilience zones, and you're counting how many copies of your data you have, ensuring that across the board you are assuming breach, and you're having that kind of natural segmentation as well, which is completely opposite to what some of the most common formats or solutions that we see when we speak to end users is having a direct attached storage, for example. Now, we see that environment and we think immediately this is not immutable, because a ransomware attack, a breach to any side of that solution will compromise the entire environment. Now, breaking this down a bit more, looking at the 3-2-1-1-0 strategy, again, this is just 3 copies of your data across 2 different types of media, 1 offsite, 1 air-gapped or immutable copy, which is what we're focusing on, and 0 errors when you try to recover. So we have had customers who are backing up, but they haven't tested it. And at the point when they need it, then they realize that they don't actually have backups because they're not able to recover from it. So that recoverability function is also something that we prioritize as an organization. So when we talk about immutability, there is immutability and absolute immutability. And you hear us talk about absolute immutability all the time. And for us, that means that no one within your organization needs to have access to any sort of destructive actions. So regardless of the level of admin credentials that they have, it is really important that there is that complete segmentation and that no, even the most privileged admin or attacker with access to the backup storage would not be able to modify or delete data that has been stored on the appliance. And what this looks like in order to achieve absolute immutability, from an object first perspective, we're looking at these three main features. So with S3 object storage, so you're able to take advantage of that native S3 immutability. Zero time to immutability. So we are, very conscious that there's solutions out there in the market where there's some sort of immutability, but you have to go through these levels of configurations to get there. There's so many steps between getting the appliance and having immutability. For us, there needs to be absolutely zero time. So as soon as you create an S3 bucket, or as soon as you start writing your data in, it needs to be immutable right off the bat. And finally, having that purpose-built appliance. So not necessarily just getting a bunch of disks and retrofitting that to work for your environment as backups, but having an appliance that has been built purposefully for that to give you immutability. And so again, it just means that you have data that one is protected, will be protected in the case of a ransomware attack, and is recoverable. So for us, that's where we come in as Object First. We have three primary pillars, which is secure, simple, powerful. We consider ourselves to be a security first organization, and everything kind of comes after that. All of this wraps up to provide a ransomware pro solution. And for us, when we say that, we're not saying that no, our customers or end users will not be hit by ransomware. What we're saying actually is, and it's in our mission statement, is that no one using our solution alongside with the Veeam platform will ever be in a position where they have to consider paying ransom, and that's because their data will be immutable and they can recover from it. My next few slides just go into the secure, simple, powerful in a little bit more detail. So from a security perspective, we're saying we're completely cutting off that OS layer. So there is no root access. And again, this is no destructive actions from anyone within the company and across the board, across all levels of admin credentials. And when we also say that we are absolutely immutable, we don't want it to be just our organization saying it. We believe in being externally tested. And that's what we've done here with the NCC group. So they're basically a group of ethical hackers, and they've gone through this process of testing our solution. And what we've done here is simulating a ransomware attack so that we're very confidently able to go to our customers. And when they ask us, what happens if we're hit by ransomware, we can step by step say what will happen because we've gone through that process. And so NCC Group had our kit and tested it for a series of about 54 days, and they went through a series of 2 major tests, and they've released the report online. So this is publicly available. You can get it on our website. But I just want to highlight a bit of the report here, which says that even if all of the customer secrets, including the administrator credentials and bucket credentials, are known to the attacker still cannot modify data that has been stored on an would-be appliance. And for us, this makes all the difference because we are very aware that as a storage vendor, we're in an industry where no one else allows for their kit to be tested. Many of them will have within the contract to not have it tested. And we've taken the completely opposite approach of that. So, and outside of this, we have real life scenarios as well, where we know organizations that are using our product and have been hit by ransomware, and our solution have been the last one standing, really, the impenetrable backup solution. From a simplicity perspective, we have a user interface that's very intuitive and easy to use. So you have a snapshot of what that looks like here. The setup, you're able to go box to backup within 15 minutes. So that's quite literally from the moment you power on the node to getting access to the user interface and connecting with Veeam. All of that can be done within 15 minutes. And this is because the setup process is really easy. All you need is a few IP addresses for your network cards, setting up your username, your host name, your cluster IP, and you'll be just done. If you're interested in having kind of deeper insight into what this looks like, I'm happy for you to reach out and we can run through a demo and take you through every one of those steps. So the solution is powerful. So we have different sizes, but each node will give you either 1 GB or 2 GB per second, depending on the size and the scale you need as well. So as you add more nodes to the cluster, you're adding performance as well as capacity. So there's no performance degradation as a result of adding more nodes to the cluster, and you're able to have a maximum of 4 nodes within each cluster. Each node will also support 20 instant recovery sessions. And how this works, say you've been hit by ransomware, the UDB node, UDB stands for out-of-the-box immutability. So the UDB node will basically act as your primary storage in that you're able to spin up your VMs directly from the node. You just need to provide it with some sort of compute. So say if it was VMware, vCenter would provide that, or you're able to use any other hypervisor that you'd want to use. And again, with each node providing 20 of those sessions, if you have 2 nodes, for example, that would be 40, and that continues to increase to a maximum of 100 sessions per full cluster. So here just emphasizes again the flow of data and who's responsible for what in this kind of relationship. So a lot of the things that our end users do in Veeam, they continue to do. So the learning curve isn't very steep, and that's because Veeam's still primarily responsible for the backup schedules, the retentions, the policies. All of that still happens on the Veeam platform. All that really changes is the repository where the data needs to sit. And in a case where then there's multiple sites, you're able to use the backup copy or the scale-out backup repository to choose where you want to send your data to and for how long. Veeam also would encrypt your data, and we receive that data encrypted and return it as such, so we don't do anything to change Veeam's recommendations across encryption and even block size. So the 1 MB block size that's recommended, our solutions are powerful enough to support the IOPS required for that, and so we keep it at that level as well. We've had a few new features that have been really interesting, first of which is the honeypot. So this just acts as a decoy VBR server that's mounted on the UDB node. So it's a free feature that comes with the solution, and all you have to do is just click enable and have the IP address there, and it will just run in the background. And the goal here is that if your environment is infiltrated, they'll think that this is your VBR server and they'll trigger the alert. Immediately you get an alert, and it also gives you an IP address where the pings come from. So that just really helps in terms of internal investigations as to what's happening. And finally, we have the fleet manager. So this is for end users or partners that have multiple UDB nodes across different sites. This just allows you to manage from a simple pane of glass. So it's very similar to the dashboard for each node or cluster, but it just means that you're able to have more of a kind of global view of all the nodes you have across various sites. And just very quickly, because you often need to hone down that it is a physical appliance. So here's what's in the box. We have a custom hardened Linux OS that's in a mirror RAID that helps, of course, with business continuity. We have an NVMe flash cache. This is just the one drive. If this goes down for any reason, the Veeam backups will ping this layer a few times. If it remains unresponsive, it'll just keep and write straight to capacity. So while our SLA is next business day for all hardware parts, you don't necessarily have to wait for the next day for your backups to continue, because automatically they'll just seek out the capacity drives and write straight to them. All the drives are different sizes and kind of number of drives, but they will all be in a RAID 6 array. And each node will also have dual NICs. So you have the 10 gig base TOSFP plus, and both options will be available on the node. So you're able to make the decision of which one you want to use at any point before installation. And here's just a slide to show the different sizes that we have. So we're able to start really small, supporting across edge locations as well with a desktop mini, but perhaps more common nodes or the rack mounts one. So the 2U chassis that fit within the data center, and that you're able to scale up and out with. I'm going to pause here as I have come to the end of my presentation. The goal here really was to show you First, talk about some of what we're seeing in the industry and the impact of ransomware attacks across the Zero Trust model and how that's evolved or needs to evolve to the Zero Trust data resilience principles, why that's important, some of the key features there being the separation and segmentation of the backup software and the backup appliance. So in this case, you have the Veeam software and you have the Object First appliance. Within the Object First appliance, then you have completely cut off of the OS layer. So removing all root access so that it's impossible to perform any sort of destructive actions which classify as deletion or modification. And then just showing you again what the product itself looks like, some of the features there, and some of the sizes that we have. If you have any more questions, I'm happy for you to reach out to me on LinkedIn or send me an email, and happy to set a much deeper deep dive into a demo so that you can see what that looks like live as well. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you for that, Marv. That was really good. If anyone's got any questions, or feel free to put it in the chat. We've got time at the end as well for Q&A session. So something that pops to mind, just pop it in the chat and we can answer it at the end of the session as well. That leads us on to the next presenter, which is Leah, who is just a recently announced Veeam Vanguard as well. So congratulations, and over to you, Leah. I'll stop sharing and let you take it away.
Thank you, Mark. So just a very quick, brief introduction for myself, in case anybody does not know me, as probably most of you don't. I am an IT technical consultant, so I work for a large MSP across the UK. We spend most of our time deploying various different solutions for customers. Myself, I specialize in sort of virtualization, servers, backup, storage, that kind of stuff. So this all kind of ties in with what we're going to talk about today, which is really around VCF operations and Veeam. Joined the Vanguard recently, which was quite nice. So I'm very excited for that. But I'm also a Broadcom Knight, so it means I really spend really too much time in VMware as well. So this is kind of what's sparked this idea for me, which is that I kind of wanted all of my dashboarding in one place, and the functionality of VCF operations felt like the sort of good place to start with it. So I have not got slides for today. We're kind of just going to be having a look in VCF operations at the dashboards. We're going to be looking at the live data. I'm going to run you through the dashboard that I've created. I'm going to run you through how you can view all of the metrics and bits that it's gone through, and then how it all works in the background, right? The idea behind this is that it's really flexible, and how you set this up does not need to be how I want to set this up. Ultimately, if you can find a way of getting the data into VCF operations, which we'll go through how to do that, then ultimately you can create whatever you want. It doesn't have to look or function like this. I will be putting some details over on my website, which is at blog.leah.co.uk, over the span of the weekend, with the full deployment guide and steps to get exactly from absolutely nothing configured in VCF operations all the way through to a completed dashboard that will be shown through today. If anyone's got any questions, do drop them in the chat as we go. And there should be a good 5 or so minutes left at the end of this where I'll have a bit of a run through any questions that anybody does have as well. So I usually quite like it to be a little more interactive as well. So do ask away. Hopefully you can all see my screen and get a lovely good shot at my dashboard.
Yep, let's see that there.
Sweet. Thanks, Ian Mark. So with the dashboard, I've got mine pinned to my home set in VCF operations. So if you decide to pin a dashboard, you can get it to your home and it kind of crops up in your top bar. With VCF operations, you can access any dashboards from the infrastructure operations tab and then followed by the dashboards and reports. Then it will just crop up in a list of anything that you've got access to. In my case, they show up in, say, recents, but they'll also show up in the kind of all dashboards as long as you've got access. So that's how you can get to those. As we've got configured, we have got quite a few bits here. So we've got a nice widget here that, for example, shows you through your repository capacity. So the way I've kind of structured and laid everything out is that I kind of wanted the more important stuff at the top, right? Your eyes are usually drawn to the top. I want all the important bits that I want to see right at the top in our sort of eyesight, because this is a scrollable dashboard. And that's kind of where we've got repositories at the top, right? We don't want a repository for Veeam filling up. We want to make sure we've got plenty of room for our data. And what this does is it dynamically pulls in all of our repositories. And then what it will do is it go ahead and calculate any space that we've got. So if we go ahead and say, click on my virtual machine storage, we can go ahead and sort of see any metrics or anything else that's pulling in. But really, this is just pulling in from the general stored metrics, which is what we kind of get this dashboard pulled out from. Now, The one thing to note is sometimes Veeam doesn't hand over the data in quite the way we want it with operations. So for example, if we actually drill back into where we were with the VMs and just have a look at the metrics, the raw data, we actually only get metrics to do with capacity, free space, and use space. And you'll notice that that's actually not the used percentage metric that we have. So one thing to just note is just because Veeam doesn't give you the data you want in the format you want it in doesn't mean that there's nothing you can do with it. So something that's always worth touching on is under the infrastructure operations and then configuration section, you can create what's called a super metric in operations. And in this case, we have the Veeam repository used. And all these really are is these are just math formulas, right? So what this does is it basically takes the free space and the overall capacity, subtracts that from 100 and then multiplies it back by 100 to get us a percentage as opposed to say a flat number, or a decimal rather is what we would have ended up with because it's division. And that's how we're able to manipulate that into data that we want. So I think that's quite nice to go over with the sort of the scope for supermetrics is you can do a lot with it, and just because the data is not in the format you want doesn't make it sort of a bit of a non-starter, right? Like I was less bothered about when I initially saw this about seeing the raw amount of data because percentage I think carries a little more weight to as opposed to say raw quantity, right? 200 gigs could be quite a lot of free space. It could also be next to no free space. So that percentage really gives us the idea of sort of what that means. And then as for this, we've set up a color scheme. So you'll notice that when the repositories don't have too much capacity, they're of a green color. They go yellow at different colors, they'll then go orange, and then they'll go red depending on your use capacity. Again, these kind of thresholds are all completely customizable, right? So if you decide that you wanted, I don't know, different thresholds to what I've got, so I believe mine go yellow at 80, then you can just customize and tweak these again from within the widget in operations. We've got widgets for showing our managed server status. So if we've got any unavailable servers, for instance, they would show up in this widget. Something I'd probably want to know in my Veeam setup is, have I got something like a proxy or even just a general managed server for, let's say, an agent-based backup, let's say a physical DC. If that stuff's unavailable, I want to see what it is that we've got. We've got another for failed jobs. So this one will show us a lovely little donut chart if we had failed jobs. The only thing to notice, the failed jobs should be a red donut and the job successes should be a green donut. It's the only bug I've noticed with operations is that for some reason, when you tell it to be a certain color, it just doesn't seem to do it, which was a little bit disappointing. So I kind of wanted the colors to really drag your eyes a bit more. So it was sort of supposed to be, but doesn't something I noticed. But these dashboards are also really dynamic. So if we click on this donut, we actually get the idea of what job's here. So I've gone ahead and cancelled this job abruptly so that we have a failed job to have a look through in the dashboard. So we've got a bit more live data going through it. But we can go ahead and we can see that the last run result for this particular job was a fail. And that's, I think, all the dashboard personally needs to tell us what's gone wrong. So at this point, we can go ahead and open up the Veeam console if we wanted to and start troubleshooting what exactly has gone wrong. In the case of this job, I just manually terminated it. But if you've got a job that's failing for a particular reason, the Veeam console will then give you the rest of that info. And this dashboard tells you that you've got a problem to go look at. Same idea for job successes. Have we got any of our jobs that are successful? So our 8 other jobs, because we've got one that's failed, have all succeeded, and they all should be running perfectly fine. We've got another larger widget that breaks down our security analyzer results. It's always important to make sure your Veeam server is nice and secure. And I've noticed with some customers, if we've not gone through and say done the deployment, we'll find that they don't tend to go in and actually go through the security analyzer results. And there's quite a lot of stuff in there that you probably would want to do. E.g. RDP is usually the one sin that most customers opt for. They usually love RDPing into their boxes. I'm guilty for it in my home lab, so I can't really have much of a leg to stand on, but you get the idea. The point of this widget is it tells us whether we've got any OK, suppressed, or violations of those security results. And again, it's split out into a little donut. And much like before, right, if I want to see what I'm violating against, well, then I can go ahead and click on the little donut side. It'll split that out and it will show us. So for instance, I don't have credential guard enabled. And if I've put any notes on these as well, we'll see that here. So if we look under my suppressed warnings, we can see that I didn't really fill in much of a note other than I've suppressed it, but we can see that this was suppressed by the administrator of this particular server back in February last year. So helpful for us just to also see at a glance here. Maybe we've got something that's suppressed that actually isn't a problem. Maybe it's suppressed for a reason. We can kind of ascertain all that data straight up from the dashboard. We also have a job list. So I really like this one because it just gives us a general amount of ideas of what's going on with our jobs. And this is, again, dynamic, a bit like how everything else works, right? So if we select a job from our job list, we then get a whole bunch of statistics for that job. So in this case, I've gone ahead and plotted out the read data, the transferred data, and then just some statistics about this job. So we can see things like how long did it take to run, what repository is this job saving to, what was the primary bottleneck, and then we've got a date timestamp for when that job's next scheduled to run. Again, the transfer data follows the same kind of principle with the repositories. So Veeam sends this over in kilobytes, which is a really unhelpful metric. So that is obviously not very human readable when you want to go and have a look through it. So what Supermetrics do is we can just kind of divide that by 1024 as we go to get us to our target size, right? So my home lab's actually quite a small setup relative to a lot of organizations. So I've opted for gigabytes. You can sort of see that, you know, we're only maybe reading 10 gigs for my longer job. For my standard job, it's more like 50. So gigabytes felt like the good metric. If you're in a larger order, if you're in a larger organization and you maybe have, I don't know, several terabytes of data that's getting pulled through each job, then you could just take the supermetric and just adjust that to reflect for terabytes, right? Just divide it by another 1024. These widgets also adjust with the time frame that we have at the top. So if we were to go ahead and select 24 hours or 6 hours, we'll see those. You can go as up to 7 days or custom. I've only had to re-import this as of a couple of days ago, so I don't quite have a week's worth of data, but we can adjust the amount of time that this stuff pulls from as well if you want to have a look at things over different trends. Much like a lot of the widgets, you can also use the toolbar to just do a calendar, right? You could go ahead and say fix this particular widget to the last 7 days, and now we have something that's a bit more custom for this one, for instance. So lots of flexibility. Moving a little bit further down, we have some statistics on licensing. So we just get an idea of what we're actually running in here. So I've got a 100 instance NFR. We can kind of see that I'm using only 31 of our licenses. You know, what kind of distribution is that? So mine's spread between VMs and file shares. I'm running the advanced tier. So that lets me know kind of what I've got access to. So the 3 tiers really are your advanced, foundation, and then your is it premium for the top end one? We've got an expiry date just so that we know when our contract's going to expire. There's a support ID. If you didn't have an NFR license like I do, you would have a support ID published in here. Just because mine's an NFR, we don't have that. And they've just got a note to note that proactive support is enabled as well, which is quite a nice little feature. There's also some general information about our VBR server. So in this case, we can see what it's called, what build it's running. So this one's quite nice as well, as the build for 2067 had come out somewhat recently for Veeam. So I can quite clearly see this has been patched to the latest version for those vulnerabilities. We can see that this is a Windows-based server. Our backup encryption is enabled, which we do want to see. Our last successful config backup, we've got a time noted for that. I actually got sparked for this idea based off of a vCenter that was not backing up properly, and I didn't know that it wasn't backing up properly. So I've started, if I can catch wind of successful backups, been plugging that data in just to make sure that we've got a dashboard that will tell me, you know, if my last successful backup date doesn't line up with, let's say, the correct day, then I know I've got a problem. And then we do actually have our config backup schedule is enabled. Seen it on some customers where they don't have it enabled. It's definitely not good. We've also got just a list of managed servers, so we can see what's connected in here and some general idea of what they are, right? So we have this particular server at the top that's a Linux host. It's not a Veeam infrastructure appliance. It's not the VBR server, and it's connected up with single-use credentials. So like I know this is my hardened repository or one of them, and that single-use credentials tells us that. We've also got various other bits we can get for other ones. So the VI hosts don't really have too much in here, right? They're not kind of any of the above. They're just an infrastructure host. In this instance, they're both vSphere environments. And then we have the VBR server itself, which we can see does have the is VBR true. If you deployed one of the Veeam infrastructure appliances, then you would have an is the VIA would be sort of true. Again, these are kind of custom labels, so the default is not is VIA or is VBR. These are values that you can kind of pick, mix, tweak, etc. Similar idea for proxies, just tells us what proxies we've got. I don't actually have any dedicated proxies, again, with it being small environments, so they're all just the native VMware backup proxy. But we can kind of see what type they are, what kind of tasks they've got. And, you know, if you had additional proxies, let's say in your virtual environments at your organization, then you'd see all of those in there and just, again, more information. Same kind of idea with SMTP. So it gives us the idea that we have email notifications set up within VBR and what that rough configuration is. So we can see that it's talking to this particular SMTP server with this from address and this to address. Mine then has the is enabled false, which would normally be of an alarm. Now I use Veeam 1 for my email notifications just because I think it's much granular and much better than what Veeam has by default, which is sort of half the point of Veeam 1. So that's why mine's disabled. But if you didn't have Veeam 1, for instance, this would be quite nice to also show you that, hey, this is disabled. It's worth noting this dashboard I've set up with kind of only one Veeam server in mind, since that's what I've got in my home lab. You absolutely could modify or tweak this dashboard to accommodate environments of basically any scale where you have multiple VBR servers. I wanted to get this pulling some data from Veeam 1 potentially, but I was unable to get this working in the time frame that we had sort of for this. So for the moment, this is just pulling from VBR. I'd like to try and see if I can get this integrated with Veeam 1 since it's got quite a lot more data. We could probably actually mix and match Veeam 1 data and Veeam backup and replication data if there's maybe some that, don't get produced from both. That's kind of how it works. The only other one we've got is a little bit different from the Veeam dashboard, as I have this dashboard that shows me my virtual machines. And if we just say take the default one, this is a VMware appliance that is not backed up by Veeam. We have this lovely little restore points widget, which has nothing in it because Veeam doesn't actually back this up. But if we go ahead and select a virtual machine that is, what's kind of neat with operations is you can set up a relationship, which I'll go through in a moment, which allows you to map objects that show up in Veeam, in this case restore points, to match them up to virtual machines within the VCF inventory. And what this does is this allows us to take a virtual machine, which is actually a VMware object. This has nothing to do with Veeam. And we've got that married up to our restore point counter over in VBR, and we can see the amount of restore points this particular virtual machine's got sort of over the last day. Anybody got any questions so far? I'll definitely always take silence as golden. So the question then becomes, how do you set any of this up, right? Because VCF operations actually has no support for VBR out the box. Operations largely supports really only VMware products, and this is where the developer center comes in. And what Veeam have bundled, what VMware have bundled in with Operations 9, it used to be a standalone appliance, is called the Management Pack Builder. And the way this works is really clever, right? This kind of gives you almost the universal codeless building blocks to integrate this with anything. You can see here I'm in the process of trying to tweak this for Home Assistant for my home lab. The idea here is that this pulls metrics and data from an API endpoint and then brings that into operations. And that's how it's talking to Veeam. And that's both a very good point, but it's also a slightly more tricky point. So because it's interacting with the API, as I've learned my hard way with this being really my first proper foray into APIs, is it's actually quite a lot more difficult than you might think it is. So it's been a bit of a wake-up call for me. But it also means that if anything's not returned by the API, then that data itself is not actually captured by operations. So an example of this would be that the Veeam 13 API does not return data on tape jobs, and my dashboard contains no information about tape jobs. I have a tape server configured, but because it's not pushed out by the API, we're unable to capture those metrics. And I suppose that's really the only drawback, but hopefully Veeam will expand what you can pull from the API. If you just Google VBR API guide, Veeam have a wonderful bit of documentation that tells you quite literally every API endpoint and every bit of metric that you can pull from it. So anything on that list, you can start pulling into here with various get commands. So how does it work? To start with, we need a source, and Veeam does not use static API credentials per se. You can't interact with VBR via just basic auth, which does make this a little more challenging. So we need a collector. So a collector is just basically an appliance that pulls metrics into operations. You can use a dedicated collector, which is what we would recommend with VCF. You can also just use the VCF operations default collector if you want to. In the case of defining the source connection, we're going to throw in a host name. So this is the fully qualified domain name of our VBR server. We'll need the port of the API endpoint for VBR. Now, the default port is 9419. If you've changed this for any reason, then you wouldn't be using 9419. For TLS, we really want to look at the options of either verify or no verify. So you're either verifying that the SSL certificate is in fact trusted if you've got that kind of a setup in your organization where you're doing custom signed certificates. I'm not, so I'm just going with the no verify option as we're just using self-signed certificates for everything in this. And then sort of by default, we've got our preview for our API path, which is really our host name over SSL with HTTPS using port 9419. The authentication details is where things start to get a little more difficult. So Veeam operates with a bearer token. So the idea is that you put a push command over to the API endpoint with some user credentials that have access. This then generates a bearer token, and then that token can be refreshed and reused for various bits down the road. It is technically the best and most appropriate way to do APIs as opposed to basic auth. This is why Veeam mandate it this way. It's kind of the secure by nature default, and they don't really give the option of using insecure methods like basic. So what do we actually need? Well, we only really need a single field, and we need a password. What we need is we need the password of a local user on the VBR server that has the correct permissions for this. I wanted to use read-only. Principle of least privileges is always preferable, but I did find that the read-only user actually doesn't have access to certain things. For example, if you're not a VBR administrator with the highest level permissions, you actually can't read the licensing data, which was a bit of an interesting one. So in this case, we had a field. I've just called it password, and it's the password for that account. In this case, it is a Veeam administrator, and that's kind of all we need. Now, we mark it as sensitive, so we can't see what the data is. And then we use session-based authentication. We enable that down here. And what this does is this allows us to use that account to get an API token, and then we use the API token to go ahead and do the rest of our metric grabbing. From there, we need to go ahead and generate our session. So to start with, you just run a post command against the login endpoint. So Veeam have this documented on their website. It's called the API/OAuth2/token. That's how you get a token. We get the default sort of content type, and we make sure that this is set to this application XWW form URL encoded. Again, it's documented on the Veeam API endpoint. That's where all this information has come from. Veeam, from their documentation, require something in the header called an XAPI version. So we just make sure we specify what version of the API we're going to be using. Again, these versions are documented on their API guide. And then the only other one we need is we need to make sure we've got accept application/JSON to take the JSON format in properly. And then the slightly weird part is we kind of need this big body. This is sort of what is expected if you run, say, a curl command off of a Linux machine. So we kind of have to adapt this for operations, but this basically just puts out the skeleton. So when the data is pulled back, operations kind of actually goes, oh, I know what to do with this because, I have the skeleton in my body. And when we go ahead and make that session, what will happen is that account, we will go ahead and get our token from here. So we can see we have this particular bearer token from here, and that grabs us to start with. What we then need is we need to make sure that we retain this token. So we make sure that in the session fields, we have this access token, and we can see sort of a chunk of my access token here. And then we make sure that we define global connection settings. So this is what's going to be applied to everything down the line. And really, we just want to make sure that, again, that content type set up correctly and that we have that XAPI version, right? If we set it up in the global HTTP header here, I don't have to add that to anything else down the line. We can go next. And then we can just test that we actually can log out properly with our token, right? So we check that this will, in fact, post the logout, which runs successfully. That's all we need. And then we run a test connection. So what we go ahead and we do is we say, well, all right, now we've got our bearer tokens and everything else set up. We need to make sure we can actually pull data. So in this case, I'm just going to retrieve the license info. Veeam have it documented that API is its API/v1/license. Most of what we're going to run is get commands, right? We're not editing any data in here with operations. The dashboard's really just for pulling metrics. So they're basically all going to be get. And the only bit that we do need to make sure that we add in the HTTP header list is an authorization header with the value that's bearer. And then you kind of get this space with this $ attribute, which is this access token. What you can do is you can just type in bearer and then a space. And then if you click this little paste icon, you can see in here the access token's pre-populated. So you don't need to kind of worry about where on earth does this come from? Because it looks really complicated and I banged my head against a wall for too long trying to figure that out. But you can just basically pull it straight from this sort of list of pre-stored credentials. And if we go ahead and test our connection over here, what we should do is we should then go ahead and get the licensing information from Veeam. So you can see that's then pulled back in JSON. And that's basically all you need to configure the source. I say basically, there is quite a lot that's involved with it. From that point, you can just start defining requests, which is what I've done. So we say, I want all of my data, where is it? How can I get it? We define our objects. So this is kind of how the data is represented in Veeam. So for instance, if I have a look at our backup job states, we need to make sure that we specify which attributes we're pulling through, which ones are properties and metrics, and what uniquely identifies something, right? So typically it's going to be things like names and IDs that make them uniquely identifiable. And then what you can also define is a relationship as well if you want. So relationships match objects to other objects. So in this case, this is how this relationship is set up. So if you remember, we looked at our VM dashboard. And what this goes ahead and does is this marries up, if we use all of our objects, a vCenter virtual machine, and we match that to the name. So when you look in here, you can just type in the name and you'll find there's a configuration name. We match that back to, on the restore point list, to, again, the name that Veeam provides. And that kind of creates our two-way match set. And that tells operations that, hey, you should probably associate this virtual machine with this backup object that exists in Veeam. And that's how we're kind of able to create that relationship, and then we can create dashboards by sort of going, hey, look at this other object, pull data that's relevant. Once you've got that done, you can run a verification. So what that will do is it will verify all the requests that you put together and make sure the data actually comes through properly. So we can then see all of our objects in here. So this is all the security analyzer stuff. We can see all the data that's come through here. If we go ahead and have a look at our backup job states, and we go and have a look at it was the long job I cancelled, for instance, we can see that this is where the data pulls in for things like, how much data was processed, read, transferred. And this data is just the raw data that's pulled in from the APIs. This is kind of everything. Is the data exportable once configured? Obviously, source data would need to be amended each time. I'm not entirely sure what you mean with that, Dan. Sorry. In the sense that, really, once you've got this defined in operations, that data just keeps getting pulled in. As long as that VBR server kind of exists and the account doesn't change, nothing is particularly different. If you had multiple VCF operations side, yes, you can export the management pack template if you want to import that. It's supposed to have to set up everything all from scratch in that regards. The only gotcha to be aware of is that if you make any changes in the management pack builder, and somebody is very welcome to correct me if I'm wrong on this, because I can't find a way to do it. Anytime you make a change and you want to install it, if you already have the management pack installed, you must uninstall it and reinstall it, which in turn nukes your dashboard if you've got stuff set up like, let's say I already have and I wanted to change something, but it also removes all of your historic data. So that's the only really annoying bit with it. Michael was asking about whether this would work with VVF or VCF only. Operations is part of VVF. I would need to double check. As long as you've got access, as long as the management pack builder is within the developer center, I don't see why it won't work. And from my understanding, I believe the management pack builder is a part of VVF, so I don't see any reason why it won't work. Yeah, as far as you know, the management pack builder is part of VVF. If you've got the management pack builder, you can do this as part of VVF, yes. But that's pretty much how it works in a bit of a nutshell. I will be putting an article up on my website that goes into this in a lot more detail because there is quite a lot of bits that go into this. And once you've got the data in from the inventory list, if you come into the integration section, if you see this when you open up the inventory, just click the little detailed view button. Here we can see everything that we've got connected. And here's where we have the Veeam object with all of our data points, right? So if I want to go ahead and have a look at my backup job states and I have a look at my long job, this is where we can see all of those metrics that we pulled in here, right? So we've got all of the properties that we get from the API, all of the metrics. And then if you do create any super metrics like I've done, so those are the mathematical operations that change data. So in this case, it's changing the session progress data into gigabytes away from the kilobytes that it uses by default. We'll see everything here, and this is where you can start kind of clicking on things and you can get an idea of what these might look like, and you can create these from dashboards. So if you want to see everything that you could put for data points, then you can see it all from here. I didn't include everything in my dashboard, so you get a lot of flexibility in terms of, when the data's in, you can kind of manipulate and change it. I'm hoping that kind of makes sense. In terms of how this works and what you can do with it. Does anybody else have any other questions? Otherwise, that brings me kind of towards the end of what I wanted to go through.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for that, Leah. That's been really good. Hopefully everyone's found it useful, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you, Leah. Appreciate it.
Thank you. And just need to introduce then our final speaker, Mr. Dalrymple. So for those of you who've been attending these events over the years will probably recognise Craig. He's one of the original members who set up the user group many, many years ago, I think. What, 10 years ago, maybe more?
10, 11 years ago, yeah.
Yeah. And Craig's just going to go through a session of just why you need to do data protection. I think it's fair to say.
Thank you.
Well,
Yep. Just confirm everyone can see my screen okay?
certainly can.
Excellent. Okay. So some fantastic sessions there about technical content, really technical there from Leah. I really enjoyed that. Being an API fan and mucking around with dashboards, that was right up my street. So yeah, really enjoyed that. So I wanted to kind of round out the session today, less of a technical session, more of I don't want to say thought leadership, that makes me sound grander than I am, but just a little bit of thinking differently about your job. So everyone in here is, a Veeam admin, a Veeam user, solutions architect, designing infrastructures, etc. So this talk is maybe something you can add to your toolkit as we go through from a Veeam perspective. So this isn't a product talk. It's not a deep technical walkthrough of anything, of product set or feature sets or anything like that. This is about how we think about protecting data and whether those decisions still make sense when things go wrong. So this session is about aligning sort of what we build, what the business expects, and what actually happens on a bad day. So it's a conversation about how we think when we design data protection, not how we deploy or how we configure. And I guess the question throughout all this, and there's questions that will be asked and appear on the slides as we go through this, is the question is whether those things, those decisions we make still make sense when the pressure is on. So let's start off with an easy question. When was the last time you had to explain your backup design to a non-technical audience? As techies, how does that translation piece of that? So throughout this, please feel free to react, nod, hands up, short comments welcome, hand gestures, probably not welcome on camera, but yeah, feel free to follow along and interact as much as possible. So again, most technical teams on here, most techies on here could probably explain exactly how their backup works. Talk about proxies, talk about how we can do data movers, how we can do block level replication, all that kind of thing. And most of us on the call are very good at building sort of Veeam infrastructures. We know about backups, repositories, immutability, 32110, etc. as part of that. We talk RTOs, RPOs, jobs, repos, performance. But at the end of the day, this is about business. What we're doing, what we're putting in place is all about affecting business, and business talks revenue, risk, reputation, and regulation. Those are the main things that business talk about. So we as IT, we're thinking RTOs, RPOs, jobs, repositories, performance, etc. as part of this. Business is totally different. So what's harder for us is explaining why certain features, why certain decisions were made. Not why Veeam, not why this Veeam feature, but why is this data? Why this data matters to the business at say 3 AM on a Tuesday under pressure, when the execs are on the phone saying, "Where's my data? Where's our order system? Get this up and running." Why this RPO? Why that retention? Why this data gets priority over that data? So this kind of bringing technology as technologists and Veeam admins, etc., as part of that, Veeam architects, bringing those technology and business values together is kind of data resilience. That is what data resilience is. And what we see when I'm dealing with customers is data resilience fails at translation, not at the technology end. Okay, the translation gaps rarely show up during normal operations. They usually show up during incidents, audits or uncomfortable conversations about why this failed or why didn't that work the way it should have. So when things go wrong, technology isn't usually the first thing that's questioned. It's the decisions that are behind that are. So question for this slide, and take this away with you. Where do you see the biggest gap today between how IT, we talk and think RTOs, RPOs, jobs, repos, etc., about protection, and how the business hears that? Again, the business is expecting to hear their language: revenue, risk, reputation, regulation, all that kind of valuable business talk. So we need to flip our thinking. We're technologists. We implement infrastructures. We build, redundant infrastructures across different technologies, different vendors. So let's flip our thinking a little bit sometimes when we're doing this. Let's think about outcomes, not technology. So no organization buys backup because they like backup. They buy it because they need an outcome. They buy outcomes. So they buy it because they want the outcomes of staying operational, limiting disruption, recovering with confidence. So technology is really the means here, not the goal. So we've got to think about design from an outcome, not the technology. So when we design protection around technology first, we kind of end up going back and trying to retrofit business justification later. You know, I'm thinking off the top of my head here, hey, Veeam just released Object First, I've got immutability, great, we've got that, let's get that implemented, but how do we justify that back to the business? We've got to try and crowbar that in. So flip your thinking, think about the outcomes first. You know, resilience, data resilience thinking flips that. Start with the outcomes, can you derive your requirements from those outcomes, then select and configure your technology. So outcomes over technology is the takeaway on this. Oh, I just realised my keyboard's not working here. There we go, it's working now. So we're talking about business over technology. That was my crude attempt at doing business over technology. So think about outcome first, okay? This order matters. Then your risk assessment, because everything's really risk management, you know, risk mitigation, risk reduction, risk avoidance, risk removal, that kind of thing along the way. From that, we're then going to create our requirements, and then the technology comes. So the question as we're going through this is, what outcome are we really trying to achieve here, and for whom? Are we trying to achieve it because we want to put this new cool feature in from Veeam or Object First or any of our partner vendors? Or are we doing it because the business has a need for that? If you skip that question or thinking that way, you're probably going to, you potentially could end up with like perfectly configured backups. You know, there's nothing wrong with the way the backups are configured, but they ultimately fail the business anyway because they're not addressing those business outcomes. So the question here is, if you removed the tools and the technology, what would the outcome still be clear? Take that out of the equation, take the tools and the technology out of the equation, is the outcome still clear as part of this? So thinking, designing backwards. So let's not start with the technology and then trying to fit everything to that. Start backwards, let's start with outcomes. So start with the impact, not the implementation. And the simple question to start here was, what actually happens if a system goes down? I don't mean technically, you know, what if, you know, my SAN goes offline? Well, that means I'm not able to get the storage presented to my virtual machines won't back up, won't power up, blah, blah, blah. No, let's talk about and understand who is affected, what stops working, and how quickly does recovery recovery matter in this? If you don't agree as a business what bad looks like, how can you design for it properly? That's what this is supposed to expect you to think about, change your way of thinking. So start with the impact, work through your requirements, and then come up with technology. Because technology decisions without impact context are just educated guesses, really. I think that should do it. I think to do it. Now, the problem is with that, if you think it's an educated guess, is that you only find out if that educated guess is correct when there's an incident. We don't want to be in that situation. So designing backwards effectively forces clarity before configuration. So question for this one is, take away, do your current design start with impact or with what the platform can do? Are you designing for this great new feature that's on Veeam, Object First, any of our partner, or are you talking to the business first, understanding their business needs and bringing that into your technology designs as part of this? Here's a scenario I'm guarantee everywhere in this call is at some point in their career come across, that everything is critical trap, okay? Equal protection removes prioritization. So if everything's critical, nothing is. Treating everything as critical feels safe, it feels fair. It's also one of the biggest causes of recovery chaos. Treating all data as tier 1 feels simple, but it's rarely aligned to reality. When everything is the same policy, there's no recovery order, no trade-offs where were agreed in advance. You know, we need to have these systems coming up first, you know, tier 1, tier 2, etc. And no one really understands what comes back first. It's a bun fight, really. It's everyone's fighting over, I need my system up, I need my system up. You know, you've got your executives wanting their email back up and running, you want the business, you want the ordering system back up, you want payroll back up, you want your test and dev. It's a mess, chaos. That's the word he was talking about. So during the incident, prioritization doesn't disappear, it just becomes stressful and political. It's still there, but it's down to, like I say, down to a bun fight. So as I say, if everything's priority 1, nothing really is. So data resilience is more about protection. It's about appropriate protection for your workloads, understanding your environment, making sure you've got that tiered correctly, you understand the business units that are affected on each of those tiers and how you bring them up in order. So question, I quite like this quote, resilience isn't about more protection, it's about appropriate protection. That's a good one. You could take that one. You can have that one for free. So question is, if you had to recover one thing first tomorrow, would everyone agree on what that is? So good one to ask back to the business, which, you know, tell me what the priority is here. So another good one is what good actually looks like. So confidence beats perfection. And what I mean by that is resilience, data resilience isn't about being perfect, it's about being predictable. So good environments feel calmer during incidents because recovery paths are understood, assumptions have been tested and tested and tested, everyone knows and covered every scenario, they know what's happening, and decisions were made before the pressure. So we're not doing this live in an incident and finding out that we need to bring, you know, this domain controller online and this SQL database online before anything else because we needed authentication, etc. It's the decisions are made before, well in advance, and the goal really is, when it comes to data resilience and understanding those technology and business values alignment, is it's not about heroics. It's not about, yeah, I'm the Veeam admin, I'm the backup admin, I'm going to come in and save the day because we managed to recover that in time. We don't want to be, it should be about heroics. It's about boring, repeatable recovery. That sounds really counterintuitive, but boring, repeatable recovery that does what people expect. That's good. That's the confidence. That's the predictability piece in that. And you could even take that a stage further. You know, we're talking about Veeam Recovery Orchestrator earlier on with Mark about some of the courses. If you've got a boring, repeatable recovery that does exactly what it does every time after time, then that's easy to fit in to something like Veeam Recovery Orchestrator, and they can take care of that. It frees your people up to go and deal with other more important day-to-day business objectives as part of that. So confidence beats complexity every time. So the question to take away on this one is, do you trust your recovery process? Have you tested it? Have you verified it? Have you gone over and over and over and nailed it down? Or do you just hope it works? Because the last thing you want to do is when at an event is hope that it just works. So as part of the data resilience and talking about your design, people and process are probably one of the furthest things from your plans and your designs when you're talking about technology. But people and process do matter as part of this process and that design. The reason for this is backups don't fail. Well, yeah, I mean, there's an argument there to be made that backups do fail, but from a technology perspective and a business value and data resilience, they don't fail as often as decision making does. So common failure points around that are things like unclear ownership, unclear authority, unclear escalation paths. So that's people making that decision in there, and also that ties in with the processes as well. So who decides we restore? Who signs off on accepting data loss? Who explains trade-offs to the leadership in an event? What's the process for that recovery? What's the decided process? What's the agreed process as part of that? So the data resilience kind of lives at kind of like an intersection of people, process, and technology, sort of not inside a console with a tick box or a registry key or an API call. The example would be you can have immutable, air-gap, perfect architectures, and it would still fail the business because no one owns the recovery decisions. No one practices restores. I'm hoping you're all using Sure Backup, at least in your backups here. Security and backup teams maybe don't talk as part of that recovery process, understanding where permissions work and access works with that restored environment. And then generally what's happening is the first test happens during an incident. That's what we want to avoid as part of that. Remember the boring, predictable piece. We want that predictable piece. So we go into an incident, we know how to recover, we know what to do. We've covered pretty much every eventuality as part of our discussions around DR and that. So data resiliency treats people and process kind of as first-class citizens, not really slides at the end or not we'll fix that later. So resiliency is a team sport, not really a storage feature or a tick box anywhere, stuff like that. And most of the important work you do as part of this through your technology designs and aligning to business values is this happens before the important work happens before the incident, not during it. So the question to take away for this one to consider is who makes the call to recover, and importantly, is that written down somewhere? And that's not just from a blaming perspective, but that's being able to, the guy who normally runs your DR run book may not be available. So does everyone know where to go and get that process that's written down? And then there's a process, that boring, predictable process that you can follow as part of that recovery plan. So you as technologists, you as Veeam architects, you as solutions architects, etc., as part of this, you have a real value in this process that's aligning the technology to business values, okay? But your value isn't configuration, it's translation. It's not knowing which tick box. It's not knowing which checkbox to tick. It's knowing which trade-offs matter, which risks are acceptable, and how to explain those choices clearly back to the business. That's your true power. So turning complexity into clarity is kind of where technical teams create real business value. So being that middle part there, being able to translate both ways. So being able to take the business outcomes, the business requirements, translate that into a technology, products and features, and then similarly coming back the way, understanding limitations within technology and aligning that and translating that back into a business talk, a language that they can understand as part of their, the risk assessment, risk management, etc., reputational, etc. So being able to that middleman translation, that's a real power as part of that. So I like this one. It makes you more than we'll call it a backup person. Backups and backups, Veeam's moved beyond backups. It's into beyond data protection. It's data resiliency. That's what we're aiming for now. That's what everyone should be aiming for in part of their designs. That data resiliency, bringing technology and bringing business values together under data resilience. So it makes you a resilience engineer. So take that into your next one-to-one or your next annual review with that one. You might be surprised that shaping and positioning yourself as a resilience engineer rather than a backup person might make a little bit of difference to you. So questions are, where do you add the most value today? Is it building the systems or shaping decisions? And I guess there's probably going to be, everybody's going to be thinking, well, it's both really. And that's the trick question in this one, it's both really. So we talked about a good day design. Let's talk about the bad day test. So I think we can all agree everything looks great on the side. Nice diagrams over here. We've got our production, we've got DR, we've got connectivity, we've got an offsite, we're doing 3, 2, 1, 1, 0, all great. Looks great on the slide. The real test is whether it still makes sense when you're tired, under pressure, the business is watching, and the pressure is on. Would your priority still be obvious if you're under that kind of pressure? Are the recovery paths still clear at that time? And all the decisions made up to that event, and even decisions that are made based on adjusting to events going on live, would those decisions be defensible as part of that? So that's the standard that data resilience needs to meet. Being able to, again, it's that boring, predictable, and boring sounds a harsh word here, but really it is. It's making sure that it's a repeatable process as part of this. So it's a bit squished question in here. So the phone rings at 3 o'clock tomorrow morning. Would your recovery priorities be obvious? Now, fast forward to the end of the year, do those same priorities apply? Because this is not a one and done. This is a constantly evolving scenario or process. So yes, the business values on, let's say, January 1st, maybe X, Y, and Z. Okay, let's understand that. Let's align with technologies. Let's jump forward 2 or 3 quarters. We've just skipped into Q2 of this year. Do those same business values and outcomes still stand today? Does your design still stand up to that? So again, it's not a one and done. This is a constantly evolving process where you go back and reevaluate the business outcomes. Does your technology still align to that? And that data resilience, does that still align with all that as well? So kind of ending all this and kind of wrapping all this up. So resilience is alignment. It's aligning technology and business outcomes, business values together, ultimately business values together. So we've got outcomes, we've got our values, and we've got technology. These are leading to data resilience as part of this. Okay, so when we're having discussions and we've been asked to design and implement solutions, etc., as part of that, let's work with this in mind. You'll make you better. You'll make better decisions, better design decisions. So understanding alignment isn't a framework. It's effectively a habit. Start with your outcomes, design backwards, make priorities explicit, test your assumptions, test, and test, tabletop exercises, etc. But that, sure backup, leverage that kind of thing, virtual labs, all that, and communicate intent. making sure that the business understands why you're doing things, and make sure you understand why the business is asking you to do certain things. Because when your technology outcomes and business values line up, backups stop being a technical function and become part of how the business effectively survives disruption. And if you can explain your backup design to the business and they agree with it, then you're doing resilience properly. So there's that translation part we talked about. You're still working, you're able to translate what you do into business value, business outcomes, and then understanding the business values and business outcomes and converting that into technology and solutions as part of that. So data resilience doesn't give you all the answers. It gives you better questions, and better questions beat better diagrams every time. So rounding out, the last one here is, what's the one thing you could change this quarter? So if you just ticked into a new quarter, what's the one thing you could change this quarter to make your recovery decisions clearer to your business? And with that, that was my last slide. I will take any questions, any feedback, any thoughts.
Thanks for that, Craig. That was really useful. I mean, it's quite clear to see over the last couple of years how backups traditionally were the realm of your infrastructure admins, and now we're getting that shift towards more business outcome driven, engaging the C-suite and getting everything kind of teed up before you start putting policies in place, or at least constantly reviewing it and making sure through regular testing that, you know, it is relevant to today rather than 6 weeks, 4 weeks ago.
You know, for being clever about this, Mark, we could have arranged the presentations in order of day 0, 1, and 2 operations. And Craig would have gone first with the design, then Mark with implementation.
There you go.
Yeah, with the ongoing management. But yeah, I mean, that's, I guess, a great summary of day 0, 1, and 2 operations as well from our 3 presenters today. We are a little bit ahead of schedule, actually. So if anyone wants to go on mic and camera, or just mic, and has any additional questions, then we can do that. Or if we just want to jump straight into the quiz, we can also do that. But really impressive presentations across the board today. Really enjoyed all of them.
Yeah. No, I'm not seeing nothing in the chat. Is anyone brave enough or with any questions, come off mute and ask away?
Silence is golden.
Yeah. We'll go over to you, Ian, the hostess with the mostess.
Hostess. There's so much wrong with that sentence, Mark. But yeah, let me share my screen. All right, so I don't know if any of you have used Kahoot before, played the game, but if you have a phone, a laptop, or just something with a web browser, if you go to www.kahoot.it and pop the pin in that you see on the screen there and put in a nickname when it asks you to do that, that'll get you entered into the quiz. So I hope you're paying attention during today's sessions because, as I mentioned at the beginning, all of the questions relate to the content that we heard about today. The winners, we will ask for some details from you. We will figure out how we do that, but typically we'll ask for an email address, your actual name. So I'm not saying any scribbles on the call or LB, but there we go. And then we can arrange the prizes that way. So how many we got here? 3. That's not the entirety of this call.
Worth saying that Adrian and Ian from Veeam, you can't enter.
Yeah, if you work for Veeam, you can't win. So don't do it.
Just to recap the prizes as well, it is a £100, £50 and £25 voucher. So you've got to be in it to win it.
Come on, these are pretty good odds here. And one of these people is me because I was just testing it. So I'm not winning. Anyone else?
Can we guess which one Ian is?
Well, I came in as Donny, but someone's outdone me here with Donald Trump. So Right. Come on, there's 22 people on this call. There's not 22 people on this Kahoot quiz.
Stephen, I was just going to say, because there's a couple of international attendees, isn't there? We've got Stephen, another Vanguard across the pond, and we've got, I think, Shane. Sorry, Shane's on. I've seen Shane in the lobby, and Andrea as well. So we've got definitely a
Michael as well.
Michael.
Legend.
Yep.
Good periodic table being built out here. Yeah, we go. Right, it's final call. If you're not in it now, then it is tough luck. Ready? Pints make prizes. Oh, well, I mean, we can't ship pints, Stephen. Sorry. Right, I'm clicking start. Hope you're all ready. Let's go. All right, so 3, 2, 1. So question 1, how does VCF gather metrics for VBR? There's 4 answers on the screen. It'll take me longer to read out the answers than for you to read them and click answer. Fastest finger wins in this game as well. So if you know the answer, or you think you know the answer, just press the answer straight away. Hopefully you've seen 4 different options on the device you're playing on.
I thought it was like witchcraft.
Witchcraft? I'm really disappointed it wasn't Veeam Management Pack for System Center. That's one of Craig Dalrymple's favorites. He loves this. All right, next question. Look at the scoreboard. Here we go. Dan's shooting off to the moon here. Next one. Question 2. What ports are needed for this connection by default? So how does VCF connect to Veeam Backup Room Replication? Which port does it use? Is it 6180, 443, 9419, or port Elite? You've got to be a certain kind of old person and geek to get full port count. Someone answered Elite, I like it. Oh, and for a tie here, let's see. The answer was 9419. What was that doing to the standings? Mike G shooting into the lead there. Dan, what's going on? AP and Scribble shooting up the leaderboard. Donald Trump. Next. What percentage of attacks target backups? So these are related to object first. So 96%, 86%, 50%, or 66% of attacks target the backup set. So you got it right. And the answer was 96%. I was surprised it was so high as well when I saw the answer. But there you go. Protect those backups. Next, what's that done? Look at this guy's on fire. Again, if you're really old like me, if you played NBA Jam on the SNES, he's on fire. There you go. Mike, you're on fire. Dan's coming back up again. More Trumps and they'll come back up. Next question. What are Object First's 3 pillars? So fast, immutable, air-gapped, secure, simple, powerful, open, object, ostensible, or safe, easy, and mega. Which one is it? You have 9 answers. And the answer was, of course, secure, simple, and powerful. So well done to those of you who got it. Oh, Mike, falling down. Dan coming back up the leaderboard. We've got another contender here. Next question. So this is object first again. What does ZTDR stand for? So zero tolerance data risk, zone tiered data recovery, zonal threat detection and remediation, zero trust data resilience. I'll be honest, I threw this acronym into AI. I was like, just give me 3 made up answers because I couldn't think of any myself. There you go. Most of you got that right. It was indeed zero trust Data resilience, well done. But it just shows you AI can talk the talk, but the talk's not always truthful. So there you go. Rich is on fire now. Next question. What should sit above technology when designing data protection? So these are from Craig's session. Is it features, outcomes, automation, or complexity? Indeed, outcomes. Hey, we've had some listeners today. I am impressed. What's that doing at the leaderboard? Dan's still up there. Still all to play for, though. This is pretty tight. Again, fastest finger.
Rich
Could
is
take the
catching
lead.
up.
Yeah. Question 7. What best indicates a well-aligned data protection strategy? I'll be honest, I think I've screwed up here and chose the wrong question type. It shouldn't be a multi-select.
There's
hope
only
I've
one
picked
answer.
one.
There's only one answer.
I've messed this up, sorry. That was big pants. I'm really sorry. But Sophie still got it right, so there we go. What's that done? This is really close, mate. This is really close. What we got? Second last question, number 8. Veeam Certified Architect is the highest level of Veeam certification currently available. True or false? So if you remember, Mark spoke about this at the very beginning, before we kicked off the sessions.
Interested to see the responses to this one.
It's a bit of a trick question, really. So we put the answer as false because it is a retired certification.
Yeah, and it was retired last year.
Yeah. What's that done? Oh, look at that. Dan's shooting off again. Donald Trump, streak of 4, well done. Then final question, where will the next in-person Veeam user group be held? So I hope you're all paying attention. Will it be London, Birmingham, Newcastle, or Manchester? And the answer was indeed Manchester. Right, let's check out the scores. Let's see who's won. Who's banking some Amazon credits to buy someone a birthday present. Right then. Is it going to be Dan? It's Dan Webster. Well done. So Dan, AP, Mike G, we need to get details from you. Mark, how do we want to gather those people?
I'll put my email address in the chat, and then they can just email me, and I'll liaise with Object First to get the prizes over to them.
Awesome. So if you're one of these 3 people, Mark's put his email address in the chat. Fire Mark over an email, and we will hook you up with those prizes. So well done, Dan, AP, and Mike. Well played. So that really wraps up the session for today. I guess I'll give one last chance if there's any questions. I see we've got a little bit of time. We've still got the peeps on the call if you want to ask, but if not, we really appreciate you taking time out of your day to attend, and hopefully we'll see you at the next event, which is the in-person in Manchester.
Yeah. I'll take silence as a good thing.
Yeah.
Silence is always golden.
There you go.
You can fly over, Stephen. We'll get you a beer. I mean, that's the least we can do.
Just one.
Yeah.
Yeah, just one.
I'll be and it can't be a Guinness. One each
Yeah.
hand. Yeah, one for each hand.
There you go. Right. Awesome.
Good.
Thanks all.
Okay.
Thanks,
Later.
everyone.
Okay.
Have a great break.
Take care. All.